I'm trying to figure out how the execution of the statements flows through this web page. Test API, that tests the graph API. Okay, so it's being called in this function. Let's see where else it's being called. Okay, here's where it's being defined. So basically that's just a method or function that gets called from inside the status change callback. Test API is the function that's using console log. So when we see this message over here, let me show it to you. Okay, when you see the message here that says, welcome, fetching your information, successful login for Samah Ramzi Labib. This right here, test API, is the function which produces that message. And it's producing it when status change callback is called, because that's the method, or I mean function, which calls test API. And since I'm already logged in, everything that you see here does not account for the opening of the dialog which the user would use in order to log into the system. If it had taken that into account, you would see a first call and a second call to status change callback. And there would be two different objects. Those they're called responses, or what is it? Yeah, response, a response object. Apparently this response over here comes from the social graph API of Facebook. I'm not sure if it's the same response object as this one up here. Response. Just for curiosity's sake, I want to point out that there's the console log function, and it's sending the string status change callback, and that's why this appears over here, status change callback. And then console log response, that's why it's showing the response object right here, because it's being told to show it in console log. You will also note that on the right side here, it's showing that, okay, whenever console log is called, it logs whatever that method is told to log, and then it writes down here on the right side the name of the file and the line number. So that's why these lines are showing up here. I thought they show up automatically in the JavaScript console, but they don't. They show up only because the function console log is called. Something else which is interesting here, you'll notice that these are hyperlinks, and also you will notice that up here there are different tabs, like we're on the console tab. If I click one of these links, like line 11, it'll take us to the source tab so that I can look at line 11 and be able to tell you where that console log function call is. And I was thinking that those were line numbers in my PHP, but those are actually line numbers in the HTML file which shows up in the browser, because there's no way for the browser to know what my PHP code looks like. Well, there's cookies. Back to the instructions here. I'm going to have Alex read this.
The first step when loading your web page is figuring out if a person is already logged into your app with Facebook login. You start that process with a call to fb.getLoginStatus. That function will trigger a call to Facebook to get the login status and call your callback function with the results. Taken from the sample code above, here's some of the code that's run during page load to check the person's login status.
It says the first step when loading your web page is figuring out if a person is already logged into your web app with Facebook login. You start that process with a call to FB get login status. The only two functions which I can see that would run as soon as the page loads are either this one or this one. All the other ones are simply function declarations. And whatever is happening over here with the button only happens if the button is pressed. So I believe our focus should be either here or here. Now, they can go on forever about this function, but I don't care really how many wonderful things it does. I just want to know where is the statement in the code that actually calls this function. That's what I'm trying to understand. Okay. Now let's see what they're saying here. By the way, let me follow that link. Okay. It's saying that the function is defined like this. But I don't even see that function being defined like that. Facebook get login status. Where is it? Facebook get login status. Okay, all it does is call status change callback. I guess that's where that code is coming from. It's just here it's implicit, over there it's explicit. Status change callback. Where is it? Status change callback. It has that if statement that they're talking about. Okay, see, there's that big if statement. All right. But I still just don't see where the call to this function is happening. Well, you notice that there's also facebook.init. Okay, that may, and that this is a self, no, that's not a self-executing function. This one is a self-executing function. So either here or here, it's triggering something, and that something may be calling this. Where is it again? This function over here. Okay? So before anybody presses any button, somehow this function is being called, which is calling this function, which is status change callback. Status change callback. Now, what other time is this method or function called? Let me see. All right, it's being called, the next time it's being called is by check login state. Okay, and what's calling check login state? Okay, it's being called when the button is pressed. All right. So that's basically what's going on here. Okay, that's it for part 2. Part 3 is next.